With golden shadows, echoes in the night, soft and haunting, flickering light, strings pull tight.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome back to The Core of the Matter, the Maryville podcast series. We're doing number 5 today with the Associate Dean of Humanities. I'm very glad to have him here. His name is Dr. Art Santirojprapai. And Art, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah.
It's an honor.
It's so fun.
Very
this
excited
is so
to be
fun.
Here. Yes.
So today we're going to be talking about theater. Art did his graduate work in theater, specifically Harold Pinter. And also he heads up our theater program here at Maryville, and they do very creative things. He also teaches overseas in London. He teaches a marvelous theater class. He teaches theater here. He teaches screenwriting. And so I'm really interested in getting finding out what he's up to, what he's really interested in. He's also a film buff, like past podcasters we've had on. So we're really excited to have him. So Art, thanks so much for coming.
Hi, Germaine. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. I'm also a little bit nervous. So this is my first podcast too. So I'm really excited to be a part of that medium. But thank you for the great introduction too. To hear all of that sort of kind of makes you look back in your life and you think, okay, I guess I am into quite a a lot of things here.
You
so
certainly are.
Yeah. So
and that's why I invited you. Yes.
Yeah. And I love that we have our St. Louis University connection.
We do. And our Dr. Jim Scott connection.
Yeah. And I owe so much of who I am now as a scholar, as a person, to Jim Scott and his mentorship. He was actually somebody who I came into graduate school actually thinking that I was going to focus on, of all things, American Romanticism. So I was going to study Whitman and Emerson and Thoreau and all of these romantic writers. But then two things. One, I started studying Transcendentalism and I realized I can't get into it. It's just too much, too trippy. Maybe is one word.
I completely get it.
I respect it in principle, but to read it is just kind of a challenge. But then I matched up well with Jim Scott because it started really with film. I was really drawn to the film courses that he was teaching. I had a film studies minor as an undergraduate at the University of Tennessee, and so we just kind of naturally connected that way. And then from there, I started taking his drama classes, and specifically in modern drama. And I realized, okay, here is a form of or part of literature that pairs up so nicely with film studies, and that they're both visual. And that just was that was it. From that point on, I just became a drama and film student who just absolutely embraced the mentorship of Jim Scott.
Jim Scott, he was a long-time tenured professor at St. Louis University. He was also one of my professors. I was also he was a good friend of both my husband and mine. And some of the best classes I ever took were from him, and especially in Victorian literature, but also in drama. And so he had a huge impact on me. And we used to talk film all the time. And back when I got my PhD, they didn't have a film studies thing. That was all Jim.
That's right. Yeah. He started the film studies certificate there, and everything.
They were a high-powered group back then.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad. I didn't know some of that about you. That's really terrific. You came here, and you now, thank God, preserve our dramatic tradition here at Maryville, which goes all the way back to the founding of Maryville. And because it's so important. The nuns, the Sacred Heart nuns thought it was important, and then the first lay president thought it was important. And so I can't tell you how important that is for the campus and for the culture of the campus. I also know many of the students that are involved in your group, and they're just a terrific bunch.
Yeah, they really are. Yeah, when I came here, it was really interesting, the state of theater at Maryville. I think there had been a theater club for a few years prior. I think it was led by or advised by, I'm sorry that I never got a chance to meet her, but Leah.
Leah.
Yeah.
Formerly Leah Schwartz. She was a fantastic actor.
Yeah.
And the St. Louis area, the St. Louis area knew her acting. She did one-person shows a lot.
That's what I heard about. Yeah.
And she was the last one I think she did. She got an NEH grant for was Calamity Jane.
Yes, yeah, and I think I've even seen a picture of her in that costume.
And she was amazing.
So, yeah, and that's wonderful. And then I guess she retired, and then once she retired, so too was whatever the drama club was at that time. And so I don't know how many years it was before I came in that there was no theater, but by the time I was here, I think it was within 2 years.
You did.
I was teaching a performance workshop class, and I just loved teaching that class. I never really quite imagined that I would be teaching acting. I've always been sort of interested in sort of the literary studies of theater and production and design. But when given the opportunity to teach acting, it was just absolutely a natural fit. But there were 3 students. I still remember those 3 students to this day that came up and said, "Hey, we don't have a drama club. Would you be our advisor for the club?"
I remember that.
Yeah. And I was just absolutely, don't have to ask me twice. Let's do this. And it was really, I still remember just a kind of like grassroots moment, if you will, where we're just sitting around a coffee table in Starbucks trying to strategize how do we make this club happen, and what are we going to do, and what are we going to showcase, and that was just exciting just to be around that enthusiasm to put something on. And our first production was actually a partnership with something that you were already doing. I don't know if you recall this, but it was a music and Shakespeare.
Oh, I do remember. Yes.
That's what you and Peter Henderson were working on. And then I think I came along and said, "Hey, what do you think about
that was wonderful.
Bringing in some Shakespeare,
you did that short,
some students,
that wonderful, didn't you do?
Yeah. Well, it was students that were coming in to do perform Shakespeare monologues.
Oh, that was
so
wonderful.
It was like music monologue, and then also Wick, reading some of the sonnets with a student. I still remember that they were reading "Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day" with another student, and it was just this really kind of beautiful, merging of performing arts and literature, theater and music, and also what I consider to be sort of the drama club's introduction to itself, to the Maryville community. I think I even came up on stage and said that, "Hey, this is our first production, if you will."
You did. You did. I remember.
So stay tuned and and see what comes next. And so in our first production, I think the following semester was the Odd Couple female version, because we don't have
a lot of
very many male students who want to give it to be on stage for whatever reasons, maybe they're just a bit busy or whatever, but a lot of female students, and so it was kind of natural to find plays that had a little bit more, just more female characters, right? So, and then from that point on, it's been
so you have you have something coming up.
Yes, so this week is actually the what I guess you'd call it Hell Week, but it's also dress rehearsal week and what they call wet tech rehearsal week, where they work on the sound cues and tech cues and things like that, and we're getting ready to put on our what's called our Showcase of Performing Arts, which is actually something new, because in the past we've been doing a showcase of student-directed one-acts, and we still have the student-directed one-acts, but this semester we realized, these one-acts are really short, and we only had 3 of them, and if we only had that, we'd be done in probably half an hour, and so we felt like we needed to kind of beef it up a little bit, and so came up with the idea of, well, we've got a lot of students who just have some natural music talent, whether instrumental or vocal. And so we thought, why don't we, see if there's anybody who wants to perform musically, and we'll make this instead a showcase of performing arts instead of just the one acts. And so we have 3 singers.
Oh, that's marvelous.
Who
I didn't know this. This is great.
Yeah, and they'll be singing this kind of the, I guess you'd call them the interludes in between the one acts as the sets are being changed and such. And I've already listened to the rehearsals recitals of those singers, and I got goosebumps. It was just the volume and the range that the students were hitting was just, it was incredible. I'm so excited for the audience to just be their breath taken away by their performances. So
you have performances next Friday, Saturday.
So they actually start this coming Saturday, then next weekend, Friday and Saturday. So 3 performances.
Oh, it is Hell Week.
So yeah. So it's been busy, and that's sort of part and parcel to what this experience is. So I started out as a faculty advisor for the drama club, right? But then eventually that allowed me to sort of come up with some other ways to develop kind of more programmatic things related to theater. So, because as you know, we don't have a theater program here, right? We don't, or a theater major or a theater minor. I guess you could kind of call us a program, but not really a program in a sense of having a major or minor.
Right.
And unfortunately, I don't necessarily see a major on the horizon. Maybe a minor. Who knows? We'll see. But in the meantime, I really wanted the club, and not just a club, but maybe some theater coursework to kind of fill in the gap of not having theater as a part of our sort of offered curricula, And so I developed a course called Fine and Performing Arts 212.
Yes.
What was it? Drama at Maryville is what it's called. Taking Stage, Drama at Maryville.
Oh, that's nice.
Wanted to get the title right because our dear colleague Johannes Wickshore is responsible for.
Oh, he's such God love him. He was such a great titled person.
Yes, yeah, and I think he really was tickled by the idea of drama at Maryville, because drama is open to interpretation of how you define drama, right? So
yes, it certainly is.
And I also think he liked that the acronym of that would be DAM. Damn. So I was like, yes, we are doing this. And so what the class is it's essentially a theater production class. We support and work with the drama club to put on its semester plays. And so what that means is however many students enroll in the class, they are all going to be assigned some aspect of the production to be a part of. That could be acting, but they have to still audition and try out.
It's a great experiential idea.
Or they can work on stage and set, or they can work on costumes and hair, or they can even work on marketing. Maybe they don't even want to necessarily be on stage or backstage, but they want to work on social media and marketing and advertising, right? So whatever it is that you're interested in, and not only that, even if you're inexperienced, this is the type of environment where you can try out these things, and if it works, it's going to be great. If it struggles a little bit, that's fine. It's still going to go on.
It's actually great stuff, because one of the things that you and I were just talking about was the experiential stuff. Along with the academic work, the experiential stuff is very, very important. And the same is true when the students work on the literary magazine. Yeah. They have to work as professionals with one another, and they have to do things they've never done before. And this is very similar to that, because and this is the kind of thing they can then translate into skills and habits of mind for professional work.
Absolutely.
Even if it's not going to be theater. Because really good hirers know this stuff. Yeah. So it's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite anecdotes actually is about one of our students that graduated a while back. Can we name names on here?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. And her name was Claire Day. She was really, I had her all 4 years. I started out as a university seminar professor, and then she found out that I was the drama club advisor, so she joined that. And so that point on, we were just always sort of, connected, as far as, mentorship, and she was club president and all these great things. But she was not a humanities student, or in other words, she wasn't an English major or history or anything like that, but rather a biology major. She did consider English briefly, but she decided to, stick with her biology major. And she eventually, her path took her to dentistry school. No, not dentistry school, optometry. That's it, optometry school. And she went to graduate school for that. But what she told me about that process was oftentimes in her interviews, for the applications or for scholarships or, for the graduate schools, they weren't really interested in hearing about like her work in biology
the content
or her
is
research
not,
and stuff.
Right.
It was actually more about the drama club and her work, because they saw in her resume that she was a president. She was also a stage manager, and she was also a multi-play director. She directed multiple times. And I think that they were just really, probably drawn to just that unique aspect of her character that pointed to, we call them soft skills, but I think of them as hard skills, really about, the ability to collaborate, the ability to build teams, and the ability to, navigate processes.
The ability to finish.
And to finish, right.
To finish. No, it's, skills is fine, but I also think it doesn't speak to really what they're getting. It's work habits, and it's also habits of mind. When you're working with a variety of people, you have to keep an open mind, and you have to listen to what they have to say.
Absolutely.
And you have to collaborate. And so that's all translates.
Yeah. And this particular
and the humanities is great at that.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what I really have enjoyed about this course, is that it's so experiential, in all of these aspects, that it's just, you can't help but feel like that there's so many lessons that are being learned here. And the case in point being, Hell Week is something that all theater people understand what that means. Usually it's hell because there's just so much work to be done. And oftentimes something is not going right. Maybe it's the lights aren't working right. Maybe the program isn't ready yet. Maybe there's still more money needed, whatever. But it always gets resolved. It always gets addressed, and it's going through that
it gets
adversity,
finished.
Right? Going through that adversity, going through those challenges, going through differing personalities, if you will, right? People
absolutely.
who, where the drama really comes in, where all of a sudden people aren't getting along well and stuff, right? This is life,
This is life, and you got to learn how to navigate it. And it's we do a really good job of that. By the way, in class too, because many of us do major research projects with students, and this has become a rare thing,
right?
And so they don't think they can do it, and they can. And presenting not just with slides, but presenting extemporaneously, just because you've done the work, you can talk about it. In many ways, what we do is in English is what you do in theater. We teach them how to be in front of people. And it's not speech class. It's you teach them how to talk. You teach them how to converse.
Right. And know your audience. And know how to interact with that audience, which is going to be a very different audience, perhaps, than what you may have even been preparing for, right? And so
what do you put? You've got this. So what are the three acts? What are the
three plays?
The three plays. The three one acts.
So it's an interesting variety. We have actually one big name one, which is The Proposal by Anton Chekhov.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah. It's a lovely play. Very
I
cute,
love Chekhov.
And about relationships and trying to the struggles of the transaction of matrimony. And
by the way,
really
modern
transaction.
Chekhov. I love him anyway.
Yeah. It's about marriage as a transaction, as a transactional process, I think. And that actually pairs up nicely with another play called Timely Maneuver, which is a more independent play, but also about the struggle of relationships, especially amongst couples meeting for the first time, the expectations and the hopes of, where do those relationships go? Then another play called Sardines, also a smaller independent play. This is kind of taking a different tack from the previous two about relationships. This one is more about social, kind of expectations of social class, the way that we perceive those around us, especially those who might be different from us economically, socially, and that voice that always kind of like pulls us back from really connecting with one another. It's a really kind of interesting sort of abstract play where you've kind of got the character, but then also their sort of conscience sort of pressuring them to act in certain ways that are on stage with them. So really neat play. Yeah, and all three really work together and especially work well with the songs that are being performed around those
sounds
pieces.
Extremely creative. Yeah. Do you work with, how do you pick the material?
So that that is really something that's actually student driven.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I want the students to be able to pick their own plays. Usually they want suggestions. They're not, especially for the one acts, they're just not as familiar with the variety of one acts that are out there because they just don't get published as much. And so I just happen to have a pretty large catalog of books that I've used in class and, some up-to-date plays and, lend out the copies and then they breeze through them and decide what they want to perform.
Oh, that's great.
And oftentimes I'm giving them advice and stuff too. I always kind of have my preferences, but it doesn't really go beyond the annual argument we always have with, which is that they really always want to do musical theater. And I typically, I'm just not really a musical theater person. And that means I don't have the experience with sort of helping to get those types of productions up off the ground. So I don't do music training. I don't do vocal training or dance or choreography, and so I just tell them, if you can find someone to do that and commit to it for a whole semester.
Well, you kind of got a nice balance this time around, though, because they're doing some music.
The music, which is something that we've never done before. So I'm really excited about including that maybe more regularly into our productions because we have had music before. Actually, Scott Lyle was gracious to be our acoustic guitar.
He's that's wonderful. He's our sound editor on these podcasts.
Yeah. And I've been trying to figure out ways to bring him back and to do some of our music again with us. He's also helped mentor. There was another time where we had a student who just needed to be on piano. And not only was she doing those pieces that were part of the play, but also providing some of that kind of interstitial, interscene music and stuff. And he was a part of helping her kind of, know the notes, know the cues, and all that good stuff. So,
he's helped us with on the podcast with the intro music and the outro music. So, and
we still have this plan. We had talked about it. I think this was a pre-COVID plan, and then COVID hit, and the plan sort of kind of got backburnered. But we had talked about doing this sort of interdisciplinary co-taught class where we would again work on a theater production, but it'd be a Shakespearean production. Maybe it's Macbeth or something. And I focus on the acting and the production part of it. He focuses on the music and the production part of it, coming up with original pieces. And especially I know how much he loves Macbeth and its sort of musical themes that run throughout it, and so I hope to still be able to do that at some point.
The rhythm that runs throughout that play.
Yeah.
The one thing I've always wanted to do, or I've wanted someone to do, it doesn't have to be me, is to do something with original pronunciation in Shakespeare.
Oh,
even if you did. Have you ever been to one of those Globe original pronunciation?
I don't think so.
Well, in my English 498 class, what we do is we do a big thing on Shakespeare and language, a big part of the history of the language. And what they learn how to do, or they learn about original pronunciation, it becomes so much more understandable for students. And one of the books that we're using it this coming spring, is David Crystal's book on original pronunciation.
Wow. Yeah.
And so that's always, and Macbeth is a great one to do.
Oh, sure.
It would be a great one to do, but that would be a really cool thing to do. And you could start out small and just do some sonnets.
Yeah, right.
And then you get the original pronunciation, and then you pick up on all of the internal puns. It's very interesting.
Yeah. We had even thought, I love that idea. It's I love that kind of inspiring idea too. We had even conceptualized that we would try to actually have a third component in there, and that would be Scott Angus. It was going to be two Scots and an art. That was going to be the type of class, and he would be the one that would really kind of help out with the design aspect.
You got to do this.
Yeah, I know.
You got to do this. This is a really neat thing.
Yeah,
you got to do it.
Yeah, because he would be able to be that source for design, right? The visual aspect of the production.
You learn
itself,
so much,
right?
in the exhibits that I've done, I learned all about. It was like taking a course from John Baltrushaitis. John, who was retired professor emeritus.
Yeah, yeah.
John was my designer, and I learned a lot about design, and he learned a lot about the content I was dealing with.
Yeah,
and he was the one who actually said to me, "You got to do it." He was the one who said to me, for the first exhibit I did on World War I poetry, he said, "Well, why not make the poetry the exhibit?" And I really don't think anybody had ever made poems part of it. I mean, the central part of the exhibit before.
Right, yeah, I remember that.
And I went, "Really?" And he said, "Well, here's what you got to do. You got to pick." He said, "Get 10, and then we'll whittle them down." And so I spent the year reading. And so it's such a you learn so much.
Yeah.
And you got to do it.
Yeah.
And you will have such fun.
Oh, I know I will, because that's the thing that what you describe about learning from working with your colleagues. Gosh, I mean, there's nothing better. I learned so much from Scott just from his. So part of my role as associate dean of humanities is that also includes music, and so every year I have to observe his class, and write up a easy letter to write, which is a glowing letter, because it's easy. The way that he teaches is just so inspiring. I always come away sort of learning something about music that I had no idea about, and I'm a fan of music, and he's just kind of a natural when it comes to relaying that sort of inspiration, for his students as well as for me as a colleague. And I think, having this idea for this sort of triple team,
I think it's
class,
a super idea.
Then I would learn so much from Scott Angus and about, what goes into vision design. I mean, that's the stuff that fuels us, where we learn from one another.
And, I'm just throwing this out there because it's, but I have Scott document it too. Document the class itself pictorially and, photographically. And then you've got this cool, unusual record of what you've done.
Yeah.
No, that's.
I wonder if could it be a core class? I mean,
it could.
Or core 201 or whatever those.
Yes, it
are.
could.
Yes,
it could. And I, of course, would work with. I would work with you on making it fit. Because it could be a very cool thing.
I think it would be very attractive to students, because that's the thing about theater is sometimes it self recruits its own sort of theater nerds, right? The geeks and that went through high school and loved theater and found their group there. So that means that sometimes there's this other population that doesn't really think that there's a place for them in theater. But what my hope is that I'm showing to them that no, actually, if you have an interest in business and marketing, there's a place for you in theater. You can help out there.
Definitely.
Or if it's in design, and all of those things, then there's definitely an opportunity here for you to practice your skills and design and creativity.
And they can use those. They can use what they do in that class. That goes into their resume and their portfolio.
Right.
Because we've got graphic designers and artists on the magazine, and they go, I get to do a book cover. Holy crap! Or I get to figure out what the layout's going to be.
Right.
You mean I don't have to have someone bending over me and telling me I have to do it this way? That's really important because one of the things that I know you agree with me on here, and we're all of one voice in the humanities, is that we want students to be independent and we want them to make decisions. And the course that you described that you want to do and the one that you do with drama, that really helps to develop their own volition and their own independence.
Right.
And that's what we really do well.
And I take a lot of also got to give a lot of credit also to some of my colleagues in other areas, like in comm, what they do with paw print. And one of the things that when I was first starting up the club, that Dustin York told me is that when you step back and let the students take ownership, that's when it becomes alive. That's when it starts to just fuel itself, right? And that's when it becomes fun, right? Because now you can be a fan, right? You're also facilitating. You're also, providing that guidance and doing a lot of that work. But now that they're taking ownership over it, now they see it as their own, right?
They do, and they really appreciate the fact that we aren't hovercraft,
right?
They really do, and I go, you guys make decisions. Here's the thing: if something serious arises, if you have some real disagreement about something, you can come to me and I can advise you. But you're going to make the decisions, and you're going to get along doing it because I said this is what your work. This is whatever you end up being in.
Yeah, right.
This is what you're going to have to do, and I've never had a big issue. Never in 21 years.
Right. Yeah. Nor have I.
And so you know, it's because and they're very proud of what they've done.
Absolutely. And there may be some hiccups on the way and adversity that comes along, but we figure it out. One of the things also, and I want to get this out there before I forget, because I know this will excite you too, because I did it one time and I don't know why I haven't come back to it. But a couple of things. One is I also teach a course I call Writing for Stage and Screen. Right. So it's screenplay writing. Writing a screenplay or writing a short play is what they essentially do. And there was one semester, and I'm trying to get back into this, one semester where I wanted them to work on something that they would eventually produce for the stage, or something that maybe the drama club would take and then want to produce, And there was one year where I found that sometimes students were struggling with inspiration. They maybe want to write about their own lives or something like that, or something else that they knew really well. But sometimes they're so close to those stories that they, don't have enough objectivity to make that into a really good story, right? So one semester, I actually had them taking copies of Magnolia.
Oh, I remember you doing this.
Yeah, and I wanted them to find either a short story or a poem that they liked, that they were inspired by, and that they would then adapt into a screenplay or a short play. And that was just such a neat experience because it was so cool seeing how a poem could transfer itself into a narrative, into a story. Even if the poem isn't necessarily about that story, maybe it's the theme or something, the idea.
Oh, you do have to get back to that because that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah,
I remember when you did that.
Yeah, kind of have some synergy between our creative programs, right? And so, I'm only just now remembering I did that, honestly. So I'm realizing, okay, I need to do that again. I need to try that because Magnolia is just such a wonderful resource of talent that we have on campus.
Yes,
right?
and it's from everybody. It's just not English majors in there.
Exactly.
It's from everybody. You get PT majors, and then you get this beautiful photograph by a cybersecurity kid, and you're going, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" No, it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. And by the way, those are the things they actually really remember from their undergrad.
Right. Yeah.
And those are the things I always tell students, your job is your job. If you're fortunate, I'm very fortunate because what I do is I get to teach about things that I absolutely love and adore. But sometimes your job, the teaching has never been an issue with me. But sometimes out there, your job is going to be oftentimes very possibly monotonous. And so you have to have a life.
Sure.
And your life is not your job.
Right.
And I tell them that all the time, and they kind of have a hard time understanding that because, they're working so hard.
Sure.
But your life is not your job. Your life is all of this other kind of experience. It's beauty, and whatever you think that is.
Sure.
And it's sport, like we talked about last week with Kent. It's all kinds of things that have to fill your life. That's why they remember these experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're like, do you remember? I had a kid. This was so funny. He's not a kid. He's like in his 40s now. He's in his late 40s. Well, so like years ago, I was teaching a Greek mythology class and adaptations. I was teaching film, literature, adaptations of Greek myths. I still do it, but I haven't done it in a long time. But and I had this kid who broke his leg on the ski slopes, and he I still think of him as a kid. He caught up with me on campus a couple of years ago, and he's running after me, And he's going, Dr. Murray. And I turn around and I go, God, I know you. And he was one of my students. And after he broke his leg, he just stopped working. And because he was an athlete. And I said, you know what? You've got a good mind and you're wasting it. And I said, because you have a good mind. And I said, so you need to buck up and start doing the work.
Sure.
And he's now a lawyer, and he's now an assistant prosecuting attorney.
Wow.
And he goes, I've never forgotten that. That's why I'm here to tell you.
Yeah.
You like shocked me into reality. And I didn't mean to shock him into reality, but he said, I'll never forget that class. I'll never forget that class.
Sure.
Some of the best stuff I ever wrote was in that class.
Yeah.
And you just never know.
Yeah.
And I think I
right.
think that's what they remember.
Yeah.
My mom's 96, and you know what she remembers? She remembers her humanities class.
Yeah.
It's food.
Right. Yeah. There's this one student that I was just thinking about who she graduated many years ago. Her name was Kathleen Jiang, and I think that she was a biology major. She definitely was into sciences and science research, but she took the screenplay writing class. She also submitted her play to Magnolia, and then she got it published.
Yes.
And I think it was a year or so after she had graduated and had already moved on to, I think, Arizona, she posted something in Facebook about, one of her favorite memories having published in Magnolia, and also, giving me some credit for, thank you, Dr. Artanger for
Please do that. Yes.
And it's like, oh, that's wonderful, because it's like, I love our English majors. I do. And I want them to be happy. I want them to feel like they're, really getting a chance to experience and learn about their passions and things like that. But it's when those non-English majors also find that inspiration too. That's when it just magnifies.
It does.
It becomes even more.
They realize, and so you got to do that Macbeth
I
thing
will,
with Scott and Scott.
Scott and Scott. Two Scotts and an art is what I kind of.
Two Scotts and an art, because that's a really neat idea. That's a very creative idea, and that's exactly the kind of thing we want to be doing around here.
Yeah. I mean, we all share the same passions, we all have the same goals as well when it comes to the way we think that art should be, not just me, but art as a subject should be, I couldn't resist, how much art should be, an important fixture of this campus.
It should. That's a big reason behind me doing this is just to showcase things culturally and artistically that absolutely need to be showcased, because I realize that students have to be able to earn a living, but they also have to be able to live an enriched life and also give back to cultural institutions.
Sure.
St. Louis has a massive number of cultural institutions, and they're the next generation, and they're going to have to steward them. So St. Louis is a great place for drama and theater. St. Louis is the film festival, 33rd Film Festival is starting. St. Louis is a great place for museums. It's a great educational city. We need to explore all of that for them and help them with exploring that, because they're the ones who are going to steward those institutions.
Well, I think some of the things that
got a great symphony.
Some of the stuff that you have done also has been really inspiring. I'm thinking about last night, and bringing, that band to come and terrific. Perform.
And the question and answers were wonderful.
Yeah, I bet. And I'm sure the students were just absolutely gobsmacked by, seeing this on campus, hearing it,
I'm always surprised when we did go west. So last night what we did, and we talked about it in a podcast, we did Nosferatu in Maryville Talks Movies, the 1922 film. And then we had a live soundtrack. A band called Rats and People did the soundtrack, which they wrote. They collaboratively wrote this soundtrack, and it was wonderful. Now, this surprised me again last night, and it shouldn't actually surprise me. But when Jess asked, Dr. Bowers asked, well, what did you guys think of this? This might be your first silent film. And many of them said, yeah, it was absolutely my first silent film. They loved it. And this surprised me because this is the generation that's so used to glammed up CGI.
Sure. Yeah.
And now, and they realized they really loved the imagery in Nosferatu because it's highly creative. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure that out. But it's 1922. It's 102 years old, but my God, it's an amazing thing. But they also loved the interaction. In other words, and the talking directly to the audience, the inner, it tells the audience what's going on. And then the music sort of helps you interpret what's going on.
Right.
They love that. And they realized, one student said, it's so interactive. It's so different than what we are used to today.
Right.
So they'll never forget that. And so I had a number of students who aren't in the class who came last night, and they all said, can we come back? And just, they really like the conversations too. We have to get the word out about these things.
For sure.
Better. And so it was really wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I love just hearing about students that it gives me hope.
Me too.
When I hear this, because I think about, you're talking about digital media that's glammed up. I'm thinking about the role that AI is now going to play in providing even more kind of artificial, synthetic, creative, if we want to call it that, art or music.
If we want to call it that,
yeah. But then hearing, right, exactly. But hearing, your students react to this real organic experience, live, right, authentic.
Beautifully shot, by the way.
Yeah. So the hope that I have is that, not that AI is ever going to go away, but when it comes to AI and art, that there is still this push towards authenticity. Well, to recognize that AI looks kind of fake. Authentic, right? If this is a real person who is actually singing, or this is a real stage play that is happening live before me, that still is sort of the brass ring, if you will, of what we should be, aiming for when it comes to art, right? Not telling a computer
because it's a personal experience.
Exactly.
We were making fun last night we were making fun, Jess and I and others were making fun last night of the podcast, the Zoom. So you send your familiar, you send your surrogate.
Okay.
You send a cartoon surrogate to have a Zoom meeting.
Okay.
Instead of you going to the Zoom meeting. And we were going, what is the point of that? To free up time. No, that's so we were, and the students have no patience with that stuff.
Yeah, right.
And this particular generation, what they're looking for is authenticity.
Yeah.
And by the way, all students are looking for authenticity. Every younger person, no matter who they are looking for authenticity. But we're shooting ourselves in the foot if we, and in the head quite frequently, if we don't realize that the personalism is what attracts us to theater, to film, to art, to music. And
my hope is that, when you think about like in film, at some point AI technology is going to find its way into films.
It already is.
And it's
horrifying many directors.
And I want and actors too, who are worried about what this is going to mean for their likeness and all of that, right? And so I want that pushback to happen. I want people to see that
people's likenesses and their voices could very possibly be stolen.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not them. And so I want the pushback to happen, but I want it, and I've always said this to you. You know this. I probably haven't said it enough in larger fora, but the pushback really has to come from the arts and the humanities communities, because we are so intimately, our work is so intimately based on the person, and immediacy, and that's why these conversations are so important, because it's about listening to one another, not to somebody's surrogate and not to some artificially created whatever. And that's why we really have something to say about this.
Yeah. I mean, it's embedded in our name, right? Humanities.
Yes.
It's a reason why it's called that.
And this is not being Luddite, and this is not being being anti-technology.
No, there's a role for all of that too. There's absolutely a place where technology can.
But often it gets spun that way.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, because there's a whole field of digital humanities that's out there that I think is a very valuable tool to learn about and to.
I use it every day.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I use a number of websites and a number of places where I can get hold of digitalized manuscripts. I mean, without that, Wow, I wouldn't be able to get some film.
Yeah. And there's
that you can't get on
exactly.
DVD.
Yeah, and there's a push now in theater to do that as well, to take all that old film.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's disintegrating as the years go on. Archiving them through digital mediums that are just why wouldn't you? Because now it's preserved for all time, and now easier to disseminate. Before you had to, make a special appointment to go to the library and fill out an application, and hopefully the application will get filled out, and then or approved, and then you can go into the special archive room and watch the film. But that's it. You can't take it with you. You can't record it. Whatever.
Right.
But now with digital technologies, especially in the digital humanities, now a push to essentially democratize that kind of access. And now, somebody, around the world in another continent can now watch this really famous production of Macbeth starring Ralph Fiennes, right? So, which is actually something I saw being posted, that the National Theater is releasing one of their archive productions of Ralph Fiennes as Macbeth, and I can't remember who is Lady Macbeth.
I bet he's amazing.
Oh man! And I saw with the clip that I saw, it was just breathtaking. Just such a good performance, and he's great at everything that he does anyway. But that kind of stuff that I think that digital humanities can get us access to.
I'm not at all against any of that. I'm against believing that we can. I'm against preserving human identity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, no, not against it. I'm for preserving human identity and human creativity and the human voice and the human participation, and you cannot replace it.
Right. And
because ultimately then you get something that's inhuman.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you get something. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in all of that, and that's why.
The funny thing is you spoke with Kent last time, and it's funny. It's kind of a shout out to Kent. He had actually been trying to encourage me or push me, if you will, to have AI write a play and then stage the play, and then let that be. I don't think he didn't necessarily say this, but I think that this is what he was leading to. Let this be sort of an invitation to a conversation about AI and creativity and art. What are its limitations, but also what are its, how could it help? And I like the idea. I do. First of all, it's a lot of work to put on a play, but then also I thought, well, I've seen some of the things that it's produced, and that would be a very interesting play. And I mean, interesting in the sense of that it was almost. Well, I don't think he was thinking of it in terms of like maybe it'd be a good play. I think it would be more of just like identifying that.
Well, he paints.
Here are its weaknesses, right?
He's
here
a painter too, and he's a very good painter.
Yeah.
And he's like, it can't do what I do.
Yeah, right.
And he's not blowing his own horn when he says that. Human creativity is one-off. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What your students do, by the way, on different days. So this Friday, next Saturday, what they do, it's not going to be the same each time.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's one-off. And they're going to have the same lines. They're going to learn from what they've done. It's going to transform their next performance. It's the individuality of even a performance is all lost.
Right.
With that. And we don't think.
Yeah.
We are so used to going after the shiny object. And we're not used to thinking further ahead.
Yeah.
And that's why I think humanities professors, English professors, art professors, music professors, all of us can actually think further ahead.
Right.
And we should be, dare I say, consulted about this stuff.
For sure.
I mean, not only consulted, but this is our lifeblood.
Yeah. It makes me think of what you say makes me think about, there was I think it's a line in that series that was on HBO, now it's Max, called Westworld. And that had such a cool series that is exploring the line that divides humanity from machine, essentially, right?
Yeah.
What makes us human. And one of the things that they identify as, what is a uniquely human trait is improvisation, the ability to improvise, right? That thing that cannot be synthetically created, yes, you can provide millions and millions
AI
of
can't
choices,
play jazz,
but
improvisational jazz.
Exactly, right?
They can't do improv theater.
Right.
It can't do it. And it's by the way, last week what we talked about with Kent, one of the things we talked about was the meaning of play. And I don't mean play just in an infantile sense or in a childlike sense. We need to play too. And when we put on a play, that's what we're doing. And when we write a novel, that's what we're doing. Now it's work, but it's also play. And that's not just human, by the way. The animals also play. And so we're doing something supremely human when we do that.
Sure. Yeah.
And it cannot be mimicked or aped.
Yeah, sure. Nor is it something that you can boil down into a set of statistical outcomes. I'm thinking about kind of the world that we're living in academia, where everything is measured by data, statistics, outcomes, objectives, things like that, and that type of quantitative stuff, right? I mean, yeah, we can kind of think about the stuff that we do as qualitative artifacts and data, but that still doesn't quite capture the level of importance that
it takes
of what we do for everybody,
right? And by the way, it doesn't take into account that kind of quantification. Doesn't take into account formation. You and I are still forming,
right?
You know this.
Yeah.
We share this experience. All of us do. When I teach something that I've taught before, I reread it and I go, how could I have not noticed that before? And then I really emphasize it. One of the things I did this semester, and I talked about it in another podcast, is I taught Hamlet as a ghost story. It changes the whole way that you approach the play if you do it that way.
Like that. Yeah.
And wow.
Yeah.
So we're all still in formation. We're all still going, oh my gosh. I could do it this way. I could see it this way. I'll present it this way. You're not suddenly, we're expert in many ways, but we're always expert in formation.
Sure. And we embrace that we are always still learning too, right?
Absolutely. That's all
So even if we think we know what something means or how to interpret something, 5 years down the road, maybe even 1 year down the road, that perspective may change, and that's okay, because now you've learned something new about, this Shakespearean play that has been thought about countless times, right? Probably countless times by you, but now here's this other angle that now provides this other layer of access to it.
Yeah,
right?
you get another
really
access.
cool.
You get another access point to it.
Yeah.
And that is supremely human to be able to do that.
Yeah. Did the students get into that? The idea of Hamlet as
they loved
ghost
it.
story?
And because I think what frequently happens when they have Shakespeare, not all of the time, it's killed by the homogeneous kind of education in high school and junior highs, where you emphasize the vocabulary and you teach to the test. And I think I do some good, because when you have that entry point and they're interested in these kinds of stories in the first place, and then you have to talk about what that ghost says, what that ghost means, and by the way, how everybody sees it. The play wouldn't happen without it. They start, you get their interpretive ability going. And they liked it. Now, most students are not wild about Shakespeare, and I'm convinced that it has to do with how it's taught.
Sure. Yeah. I agree with that. They have a very limited experience.
Very limited
coming in. They've all read the same play.
But then when they get what it's about, they go, well, that was kind of good.
Yeah. And that's actually, and oftentimes that's where my world also comes in too, right? Once I see it performed, right? Once I see it played, once I see that once they're also performing it, right? And I've the interesting thing is that I used to start out with teaching Shakespeare as like, no, you got to start with the words first. You don't look at the adaptation.
Don't look at it.
Read the words first, and then you can watch, and then you'll really appreciate it. But then took me years to realize, no, because the way I fell in love with Shakespeare was the visual. In fact, I remember it was two things. It was Kenneth Branagh's Henry V, that film version, and then Mel Gibson's Hamlet. Those two films that came out kind of around about the same time.
About the same time?
Yeah, that I just fell in love with those plays because of those films.
Mel Gibson
I
is
watched
Hamlet,
them, and
yes.
it just now the play made sense. Now, granted, I only was seeing Mel Gibson as Hamlet now for the next several years, but yeah, that's all right because then Kenneth Branagh comes out with his version of Hamlet. Now I see him as Hamlet, but that's okay, right? It's
well, the great thing about Shakespeare is he doesn't tell people how to play the part,
right? Yeah.
And what we did, we took that ghost scene this year, and we watched 5 different versions of the ghost scene.
Yeah.
I want you to watch. Have you ever seen the Ethan Hawke? Sam Shepard.
Yes.
Sam Shepard is so good in that.
Yes.
I've never. Yeah. He even studied OP to do some of those lines.
OP.
Original pronunciation.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
And,
I didn't realize that.
He's menacing.
Yeah.
He's a fantastic presence on screen. But I made him watch 5, so we watched 5 different versions of the ghost scene. That's great too, because then they get to see the tremendous divergence of interpretation that the text it supports that divergence of interpretation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So they kind of go, this guy, they kind of are like, this guy kind of is good.
Yeah. Well, the same thing goes with, so I teach Humanities 101 course every fall, and we've been working with Macbeth for the last several years, and I always make sure we spend a lot of time with looking at different versions of the witches.
I love
different
that.
Adaptations, because it's so fascinating to see how a director conceptualizes this supernatural element here, right? Some go conventional, and it looks like, those seem like witches. They look like witches. They're doing some weird things in the soil or whatever, right? But then you have some other ones that are like these modern versions of the witches. One where they're dressed as Catholic schoolgirls that are vandalizing a cemetery.
That's
another
a good one. I know that.
The most recent one, the Denzel Washington one with the Ethan Coen, where it's just one woman who's playing all 3 witches, right? But at some points the camera pulls back and you see 3 shadows or forms, right? But it's just the same actor.
That's a really good rendition.
Yeah,
he did a super job.
Yeah. But again, reconceptualizing this idea of witches, what they could look like.
Oh, I do the same when I teach Macbeth. I love Macbeth.
Yes, yeah.
And I love it because of those witches. And again, they're Shakespeare, and again, there's a lot of leeway.
Yeah.
I mean,
We've talked about, I think we only talked about doing this recently, but we haven't had a full-on Shakespeare class offered for a long time. I know it's in the catalog, but we haven't done it. And I remember I emailed you saying, we ought to do this together. Like I'd love to collaborate with you and team teach.
Well, let's do
a Shakespeare class. But how about this? Shakespeare and the supernatural. Because if it just says Shakespeare, I don't think students are going to sign up for it. But if you put in the word supernatural
and horror,
right? Now they're interested, right?
Because he could be horrific.
Ghosts and
Coriolanus is horrific.
Oh yeah.
And violence.
Now offset that with, but then there's also fairies and elves and
that's right.
Thinking about the comedies, and they have some supernatural elements in them too. Not as much as the tragedies, but certainly it doesn't have to. A class like this doesn't have to all be tragedies. In other words, it could be some comedies and some tragedies.
Yeah. Let's do it.
And then the Tempest and Caliban and the Monster.
This is one of the things, and I want to end with your take. You also teach overseas, and you teach in. Did you teach this year in our London program?
Oxford
program.
Yes.
Okay, so this last summer, and Jess also has been there with you when you taught. That must be a fantastic experience for you in your development as a professor, but also the students.
Yes. I mean, talk about a dream come true, really. You know, as a grad student, this is the type of thing that you always dream of, right? That you're going to go overseas and teach.
And watch plays.
Your passion, you know, and as a theater person, and go see plays and such. And so, this past summer was my third time teaching in Oxford class I just called a Drama and Theatres of England, also named by Johannes. And what we do is we're based in Oxford, and we do go see some plays in Oxford because there is definitely a theatrical tradition in Oxford.
Oh yeah.
But really, you got to get to London and
you got to get to the West End.
Yeah, the West End to go see really the real famous stuff, right? That you've read about in classroom textbooks and stuff. And so we'll go to London to go to Shakespeare's Globe, take a tour, and then see a play there. Then we'll also go to the West End. And
what play did you see this summer?
For Shakespeare's Globe, it was Much Ado About Nothing.
Oh, wow.
Which was beautiful, beautiful play. Wonderful. That was the highlight for all the students. They loved that because we always make sure that we stand with the groundlings. We don't get seats. We're going to stand for 3 hours and watch this as the groundlings did, because it also means we get to get close to the stage too. And that's what we did. We were right up on the stage, seeing this.
They learned how interactive.
Yeah. They realized
it was much more interactive than we realized.
Yeah. And then in the West End, we went to go see a play called The Play That Goes Wrong, which is a kind of a farce play where it is, as the title says, the play just kind of deconstructs and crumbles. They're trying to put on a murder mystery that's kind of like an Agatha Christie type of play. That's the conceit. But then the play just starts crumbling, and set pieces start falling, and all kinds of improvised cues aren't working right, and so it's hilarious. The students loved it, and anybody who's ever been a part of theater can really appreciate it because they know theater is filled with these types of mistakes,
That's so great.
You just get past it. So, but that was fun to go see. Then we went to Stratford-upon-Avon. We always do that so that we can see Shakespeare's birthplace, see where he's buried, this very nondescript grave at beautiful Holy Trinity Church. And then we went to see a play there by the Royal Shakespeare Company, but this time it was actually a play I'd never studied before or seen, called The School for Scandal.
Oh, yeah.
By Richard Sheridan.
Right, Richard Sheridan.
Yeah, and it was really cool. It was a kind of they did it as sort of kind of a glam version of the play with a very sort of model runway and kind of theme to
that
it. That
really works.
Really beautiful.
With Richard Sheridan.
Yeah, just
that really
cool.
Works.
Very, very pink themed too, and big opulent outfits.
Comedy
and
of manners.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. And then in Oxford, we actually saw a one-man. So these were all big scale productions, but then we saw a one-man production in a studio theater. Actually, I think it's called the Burton Taylor Theater, named after Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor. And it was a one-man theater called, I think it was just called Wilde. And it was about Oscar Wilde in prison. And it was inspired by the letter that he wrote in prison to Bosie.
Yeah.
De Profundis, that's the name of the play, or the poem, the letter that he wrote. And so the play is an adaptation of that letter, in a sense, and his narration. It was interesting. The students didn't quite love that as much as they loved Shakespeare's Globe, and I get that. But the point of it being is I wanted them to experience theater at different scales, different levels.
Different scales and different time frames. Yes,
and
absolutely.
And different resources in terms of funding.
The Burton and Taylor Theater, Richard Burton was an English teacher. He taught it, though.
Yeah. And I think he was, I think they were both still alive when they named the
Did
theater
they really?
after them, I think. Yeah. I think,
how interesting.
Yeah. So, but I wanted them to see, something small like that, but then also wanted them to see something in the West End and then something at the Globe. And that's really the main push of the class.
That's a life-changing experience, too. And when you do something like that, you're more likely to come back and go, I need to do this here. Yeah. Last year, we went to the readers at the repertory. David and I went to a number of things, but we went to the It's a Wonderful Life, where they did it as a radio play.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
I got to tell you, it was so entertaining, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a stormy night. And we went, and it was so entertaining.
Yes, yeah. I've seen. I think I saw one of those productions too, and I loved it. It was so. Much fun.
It was so much
just
fun.
to kind of see the sound effects and how they make the sound effects. It was
wonderful, and that I think students would really love that.
Yeah.
It's interesting to note whenever I do the ghost story, we end near Christmas. If I do it in the fall, we end with A Christmas Carol, and then I look at the whole evolution of the story of the Christmas Carol, and I make them watch It's a Wonderful Life because it's a ghost story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so they all have seen it. So that's one of the few movies from the past that they've seen it.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it's really a fun thing to do. But it was wonderful.
Yeah.
You know what else is wonderful too is readers theater. That would be a fun thing to do.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That's come up every so often as an idea of whether it be readers theater itself or readers theater plus a dinner theater experience with it. Because I think I'd heard that they used to do dinner. The previous drama club here used to do a dinner theater experience or something, which would be fun to do that again. But I got to share with you one story though that you were talking about how oftentimes theater can, especially seeing it at a young age, can really leave these lasting impressions. I hope Kent doesn't mind me sharing the experience of last summer where but I don't think he'll mind. So for these productions, especially for the Shakespeare Globe one, there's always people in the group, in the study abroad group, who want to join in with the class.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. They can join in. Yeah. And this time, Kent and his wife and kid decided to join us. And is Kira her name, the child? Yeah. So
Kent and Tara.
Tara, that's it. Yeah. And Kent and Tara absolutely were into it, absolutely into the whole experience and all that. Kira, if you're listening, please don't take this wrong. She was just kind of still trying to figure things out, and not necessarily connecting with all the other students because they're a different age,
they're different age.
And I think she's 13 or something like that, and so just kind of headphones on, to kind of doing the 13-year-old thing and stuff, sure. But what Kent shared with me was at the play. First, they were all the way in the back, and on the floor with the groundlings and all that. By halfway into the play, It was Kira said, "Can we get closer? I want to see it closer." And so they ended up closer, right up, towards the stage. And apparently she loved it. She absolutely loved that experience, right? And I think that's the power of Shakespeare, but also the power of that whole Globe experience, right? It's hard not to fall in love with that theatrical experience when you're there in the middle of it. And I was just so happy just to see that she was getting into it, So kudos to you, Kira, if you're listening.
That will change her view.
Yeah, I think so.
And because it will. Every time I took students there, I've been there so often with students. It has completely changed how they view Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And they also go, we just don't seem to ever touch upon these things.
They
love it. And also getting to see it. And then what it would have been like even back then.
Right. It really demystifies it, right? And they realize that you really can understand Shakespeare.
I always say it's the pop culture of the day.
Yeah, right.
Of his day. And then everybody went.
Yeah.
There were, everybody who could afford, and by the way, the groundlings, the reason why they're standing is because they're cheaper tickets.
Right. The common folk, right?
The common folk, and they're really interactive. Yeah. And so it's a very wonderful, I'm so glad you're doing that.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll do it again next summer.
And it's also a shot in the arm for you because you come back and you're energized and you get ideas.
Yes, 100%.
And you get, it comes alive for you.
Yeah.
You really do need those things.
Yeah. And I'm excited. We've got so far a really good push happening right now, I think, for the Oxford trip this coming summer. Some good numbers already of students that are signing up for my class as well as for the Oxford trip. Because last summer it was a bit of a small group.
Yes.
And thankfully...
But we got to build it up after COVID.
Yeah, and thankfully,
I hope to have him on, Alden, and to talk about what we do there and why foreign study abroad is so important for a generalized audience, because we've got to get back in the Jim Harf was, if he were still alive, God rest his soul, I'd have him on. Because he would be perfect.
And it would be great to have Alden come on here to kind of talk about continuing that legacy.
Absolutely.
Right? Because Oxford in many ways is... Of the three signature places we have, I feel like Oxford is the one that best represents what Jim imagined this
Right.
program to be, teaching students to be citizens of the world, right? And to be out there in the streets and to also learn from some of the greatest minds in education, not just the Oxford Dons, but us too, right? And I know he took a lot of pride in that mission. And Alden's been doing a great job of
Oh, no. I'm really pleased. I hope to get him on.
Yeah.
This has been so fun.
I've had a great time. This was fun. I really enjoyed it.
This has been so fun, and it's been so nice to hear what you're doing and in some detail, and also what interests you in some detail. I told you what I want to do. I told you I was talking to you in the hallway between, how we always rush past one another. I mean, we all do it.
Yeah.
What we want to do sometime, too, is do a podcast on noir.
Yes, yeah.
One of our alumni, Jake Billingsley, who was, by the way, took both of your screenwriting classes,
That's right.
and he's a screenwriter now.
Yep.
He said you guys ought to do Noirvember. He's Mr. Soundbite. So
honey, I love it. Yeah.
But we ought to do that because I think it's. I love noir. It's
Yeah.
one of my very favorite genres.
Oh, absolutely.
And
me
I
too.
know it from the beginning to neo-noir.
Oh,
so
it's so much fun to think about. Yeah,
it is so much fun to think about.
And I always love talking about film with you, Germaine, because clearly we share the same DNA.
We
in
do.
so many different areas, but especially when it comes to film. And I look forward to talking about it.
We'll do it again.
Till on and on and on.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Art.
Thank you.
And thanks, everybody. And please keep tuning in. We have such a good time, and this is really done for you too, for the audience, because we really want you guys to know what's possible and know what's out there. Thanks so much. See you later.